People who have survived school shootings, what was it like? Just a few weeks ago, I came uncomfortably close to what could have been a school shooting. Nobody was injured. No shots were fired. But what happened disturbed me so much that I am now seeing a therapist to talk about it. Back in August, I started working as a substitute teacher in one of the worst school districts in the nation. It is severely underfunded and understaffed. Most of the children are eligible for free or reduced lunches due to poverty. Many come from broken homes where violence, drug addiction and criminal activity are part of everyday life. This was one of the most challenging jobs EA ever had. Most of the kids I worked with refused to even stay seated, let alone do any reading or writing. I was harassed relentlessly and regularly threatened with physical violence. It often felt more like I was working in a holding center than a middle school. Last month, I was completing a special education assignment at a notoriously bad middle school. None of the students were behaving, but there was one in particular who was wreaking havoc. It was toward the end of the day, and his behavior was only getting worse. During the class period, he kicked over chairs, threw pencils at other students, called me a bitch, and tried to spit on me. Physically speaking, he was the smallest and weakest looking kid in the class, but he had all the rage of a middle-aged man in prison. Eventually the principal showed up about 30 minutes before the last bell rang. He dropped in because he heard all of the noise and commotion in the classroom. His presence did nothing to defuse the situation. In fact, it only made it worse. The students started tipping over desks, hurling safety scissors at the principal, and threatening to fight him. Much to my horror, the principal fired back, calling the student a baby and a weak guy. Despite the awful behavior, it seemed very unethical and unprofessional to mock this child in front of his peers. I could see that the child was actually fighting to hold back tears. By now, a teacher aide had shown up and removed the other students from the classroom. There were only 4 of them, as it was a special education class. It was just me, the principal, and this violent, foul-mouthed, 12-year-old kid. I was curious to see how the principal would handle things. He called the kid's dad and asked him to show up at the school. The phone was on speaker. The father was screaming at the son, calling him a little bitch and threatening to beat him when they got home. Obviously, it was clear that CPS would be getting involved. While we waited for the father to show up, a security guard entered the classroom to assist the principal. I was unable to physically restrain the rampaging child, as I am not licensed or trained. The security guard insisted on searching the backpack of the student. This made the kid extremely nervous. He was clutching the bag tightly to his chest and refusing to let it go. He really didn't want anyone to see what was inside. By now, the last bell had rang, all of the other students were dismissed, and it was just the 4 of us left standing around as we waited for the dad to show up. After a long struggle, the security guard successfully opened the backpack and retrieved a small handgun. At that point, some police officers had shown up. The furious dad was standing in the office shouting at the principal, and I was asked to leave. I never saw what ended up happening. I had only been a substitute for 4 months, but I quit the next morning and am currently unemployed. I think about that guy every day. It was a fascinating yet very disturbing look into the life of a potential school shooter. I was almost in a school shooting in high school as well. We were in the auditorium rehearsing for a band concert when the loudspeaker came on announcing a lockdown, and that it was not a drill. That was all the information we received for the next 6 hours, as the administration decided an information blackout was the best way to prevent a panic. All we could do was text kids in other classrooms and speculate. They said that there was a shooter on the 2nd floor, that there was a bomb in the cafeteria and gunshots on the front lawn. They said there were police snipers on the roof, that there was a gunfight at the middle school. They said that there was a gunman holding a freshman hostage, and that there was no gunman at all. Nobody seemed to know what was going on, so we texted our parents looking for information. They didn't know any more than we did. But the rumors and misinformation spread until the entire community was in a panic and a traffic jam a mile long of scared parents formed outside the police cordon. It turns out there wasn't a gunman, merely credible threats made by a disgruntled ex-boyfriend who was caught on his way to our school. He had a loaded handgun in his car. Nobody got hurt, but I still remember taking cover wherever we could in case a gunman kicked down the doors. It leaves an impression. I was at Columbine during the shooting. I was in the cafeteria when it started, just outside, and I thought it was a senior prank at first. After I realized it was not, I ran and hid. I was in there for a couple hours just kinda huddling in a corner with some students and teachers. I wasn't really scared, it was more an adrenaline rush that lasted for what seemed like days. Time seemed to go super slow and it was honestly boring. It is a weird feeling that I can't describe. I was more worried about my friends and GF than myself. I was close to a lot of pipe bombs and gunshots, but never really felt like I was going to get hit in any way. My parents took it harder than I did, especially my mom. She was in shock and crying uncontrollably when she picked me up. My brother was at the feeder middle school that got locked down. He didn't want to get stuck at school, so he walked home. When we got home, he was playing video games like nothing happened. Edit, forgot to mention that all our stuff, including backpacks, wallets, was in my backpack, and cars were kept for months. Sounds kinda shitty compared to what some people went through, but it was a major inconvenience. What was crazy was the support and donations we received after. All sorts of companies donated new backpacks, school supplies, books, blankets, food, and more. I think I even got a new T82 Plus. A bunch of celebrities would visit as well. It was the first day back from winter break before first period. I was about 15 meters away when it happened, just around the corner to the right. I was listening to Six Sad Little World by Incubus with my headphones, but that morning the song was different. The refrain usually had these crisp quarter-note snare hits with some sweet hi-hat work on the offbeat. That morning though, it got to that part and my first thought was, why the hell is the snare drum offbeat? This isn't how I remember it. Those snare beats were the gunshots. They were so loud that I thought they were part of the song. The school was located between rich and poor neighborhoods, and the first thing I saw after I took off the headphones were all the kids dressed in urban clothes running. And all the kids who dressed preppy standing in place with their hands in front of them in confusion, myself included. We were corralled into the gym and the school went on high alert. Police came and eventually we were let go into the parking lot with police escorts, and eventually sent home. Fun fact, the news report that day had a woman voiceover saying something like, "The tragedy was so shocking for students that many of them chose to run away from the school out of fear." Video played with the voiceover was a clip of my buddy running. Ironically, if you looked closely he actually was running towards the school, because according to him, he woke up late for class that day, and had no idea a shooting had even happened. Camera crew must have snagged a clip of him running and repurposed it. Turns out, two dudes had a beef and one of them was a known drug user who was a bit unstable. Shooter shot the guy dead in the hallway and was caught the same day after fleeing. He was eventually given over 20 years in prison, but the whole story was sad. The victim was a teen dad, and the school authorities refused to give the victim a proper memorial in the school yearbook, because they considered that to be bad PR, and wanted to sweep it under the rug ASAP. The school offered free counseling for any student who wanted it, in the library. Things never really felt normal after that, but to this day when I listen to that song it brings me back. Some friends and I were eating at Freebirds in Santa Barbara right as the 2014 Isla Vista shooting happened. The crazy thing is that I don't even go to school at UCSB, that was the only night I was going to be there. Basically we were eating burritos and in the distance we hear some pop 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 sounds. Nobody thought they were gunshots. Personally I thought that it could have been fireworks or something, you know, college kids being stupid or something. Maybe about a couple minutes pass, the atmosphere is still normal. Then down the street comes a cop running towards us and he yells, "Get inside now." That's the only thing he tells us. Everything becomes tense. We rush inside the restaurant and hide in the kitchen of Freebirds. We sat crouched in the kitchen for an hour. Eventually, a cop or someone tells us it's safe to go outside. The entirety of Isla Vista is shut down via police perimeter, no cars entering or leaving. All my friends and I know at this point is that there was a shooting and that some people may have been shot or killed. We had no idea that the shooter had actually killed 6 people. Someone, maybe a student, offered to take us to a dormitory area, so we followed them and just took another hour to digest what had happened and to watch the news for a while. Texted our parents to let them know we were all right. It was rather fortunate that I had parked my car outside of Isla Vista so we didn't need to wait for the police perimeter to start letting cars through. We were able to leave about midnight. Definitely one of my more dangerous burrito encounters. February 14, 2018, Parkland, Florida. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, 17 killed, 17 injured. By far the most terrifying moment of my life. The screaming, what sounded like never-ending gunshots, the smell of gunpowder, classmates crying, and afterwards the shock and helicopters flying with police sirens blaring. Most terrifying moment was hearing shooting on the floor I was on. I remember not being able to comprehend what was happening, the shock, and texting my parents I love them. Another moment was when SWAT was trying to enter our room. Everyone thought it was the shooter, so nobody moved. They ended up knocking the window out, and at that point I thought it was the shooter and I was about to be killed. The relief when I saw it was SWAT was insane. They searched everyone in sh00tings shirts because the shooter was seen in one. When we were being escorted, I saw 2 bodies in puddles of blood and someone's body covered in what seemed like a blanket outside of the building, who ended up being Coach Fesh. We were escorted to the intersection near school. Almost everyone crying, those who weren't crying were in shock, and people looking for friends. I remember Alex Schachter's mom frantically asking if anybody had seen her son, who I literally just heard before that people saw him get shot. I didn't tell her what had I heard because I didn't know if it was true, and I would never want to break that news to someone. I was hoping he was alive and it was just a rumor, but it later came out it was true. Since my house was close by, 7 of my friends and I walked to my house since all the streets were closed down. My parents were crying when we arrived and were so glad to see we were all okay. We all came in and turned on the news to see what had happened. We all sat there crying and in tears watching the deaths go up and up. I couldn't believe what had happened. I still feel like I'm in shock to this day. I can't comprehend 17 people were brutally murdered in my school, 6 I knew personally, were dead. The 1200 building, nicknamed Freshman Building because I think about 75% of classes were for freshmen, was the one that the shooter decided to target. The thing is, I was a freshman at the time, now a junior, so my class was the hardest hit. I can't believe how terrible my luck was. My 2 brothers loved and graduated from that school, and that first year I attend, the school is shot up and the building that was targeted is primarily my class. That's why I knew many people that had died. I'm grateful I didn't literally see anyone get shot to death. One of my friends witnessed my best friend Alyssa get shot to death, and I could never imagine experiencing that. But yay, this is my experience. I still attend Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. As crazy as it sounds, I am a junior and walk past that building every day. The windows are all covered and there is a 10-foot fence around it on all sides, with chains on the door. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I can talk about it. If anybody wants me to, I can upload pics of the school or the videos I took walking out of the building right after the shooting. Just tell MK. Dawson College, Montreal, Canada, 2006. Just before getting on the metro, I texted my BF that I was on my way to meet him at Dawson College for lunch. I asked him to meet me in the school's atrium. There's lots of tables there. It's where a lot of students hang out between classes or eat lunch. Meanwhile, a guy parked in front of the college and started shooting people. Inside, my boyfriend leaves the computer labs for the atrium and hears gunshots in the distance. Someone brought a BB gun to school. Someone says. So my BF is around the corner from the atrium when there's more gunshots. The shooter had entered the building and the atrium is right at the entrance. Students start to panic and run, so he runs with them, goes out the emergency exit, and there's a student on the sidewalk who had been shot in the stomach. Meanwhile, I'm getting off the metro at the Atwater station. It basically stops right under the street between the college and a mall. I'm now texting my BF that I'm in the mood for a Subway sandwich, taking my sweet ass time. As I get up the stairs from the metro platform to the entrance that connects to the school, it's just me and the slow old people. Cops are taking out caution tape, closing up the school's metro-level entrance and diverting us to the mall. Cops are running around with their guns drawn, feels like a movie. The mall looks closed, but I can see that customers are locking themselves in the stores. I'm so confused. The cops start yelling at us to run towards the mall's exit to Sweet Catherine Street. I'm trying to assess the situation. Do I just knock these old people out of my way to save myself? Luckily an opening forms and I make it outside. The street floods with students. I ask a girl what's going on. She tells me shooting. There was a shooting, blood, so much blood. Next to me, the girl, her legs, so much blood, she fell, bullets, so much blood, all dressed in black, blood everywhere her legs. Right next to me, she fell, she bursts out crying. I ask others. I'm told there was a shooting, 1 shooter, 2 shooters, 4 shooters, in the atrium, in the cafeteria, on the first floor, no the third, they were wearing black or military fatigues. Everyone saw something different, it was chaos. All the cell phone lines were jammed, no one could get in touch with loved ones. Social media didn't exist. It was absolute chaos. Sirens and ambulances and helicopters were coming. Lots of students had left their wallets, bus passes and keys in their lockers. They eventually shut down the metro, so lots of students were stranded. I had friends who had to hide under tables throughout the whole ordeal. The shooter wasn't even a student, just a random loser obsessed with Columbine and video games, no connection to Dawson. 20 people shot, 1 died. Story was she got shot hiding under a table with her boyfriend. The shooter asked her BF if she was dead. He said no. The shooter shoots her again, kills her. I hope it's not true, but that's what everyone was talking about. TLDR, I missed a school shooting by a couple of minutes and almost got my BF killed by asking him to meet me right in the line of fire. It was total chaos. Surreal. Back in 1996 I was a doctoral student at Penn State when one of the few women shooters killed a couple of students and wounded 2 or 3 others. I was teaching for a class and one of the students shot, wounded, was on their way to my recitation. I had no idea at the time, as I usually showed up to class 20 minutes early, so I did not hear the shots and a student tackled her and prevented her from doing more damage in 30 seconds. Fast forward a year and the student who was wounded walked into my office and asked if they could spend a few minutes talking about that day. That experience was tough and very surreal, as I had no idea he got shot on the way to my class. It was the first week or so in the semester and I had not gotten to know my students' names at that point. I was there, on the hub lawn, when she started shooting. She killed 1 student and injured another. I'm not pointing that out to be a jerk, but the victims' names and details are seared into my memory, even now, more than 20 years later. I was literally in the line of fire but the bullet found Melanie Spaller instead. I saw the brave student who happened to be walking by disarm and subdue the shooter. And I kept walking. Right to class. And then to my job waiting tables at a restaurant off College Avenue. That's where I finally realized what happened and how close I was to being a victim myself. The next few months were a blur and I nearly failed out that semester. The survivor's guilt was terrible. The campus mental health services were a lifesaver. Everyone thought I was okay, but I wasn't for a long time. I still have nightmares sometimes and I have a distinct aversion to guns. And every time I hear about another school shooting, I have to take some time to cry. I cry for the victims and the bystanders alike. And now I have kids and I cry for them because I managed to avoid this kind of violence until I was 19 and here they are in elementary middle school and they have active shooter drills at the start of every school year. It has to stop. I'm glad your student came to talk to you. While his experience and mine were vastly different, what I really needed was for someone to listen to me. And it was hard to decide who to burden with my thoughts and feelings. A neutral party worked best for me. I'm glad he felt like he could talk to you. As a side note, I avoided the corner of the lawn she did the shooting from for the rest of my time at SU. I visited a few years after graduation and the lawn was torn up for the hub expansion and the tree was gone. I unexpectedly felt relieved. The frequency of the nightmares dropped after that. I haven't been in a school or mass shooting myself, but I lost a close friend of mine to one last year. This is my experience. TLDR, when my friend died, it changed my life forever. My anxiety has gotten worse and I constantly fear a mass shooting will happen to me next. Don't take it for granted. In my sophomore year, we had a bomb threat and no one came to school. People were too scared and this was in 2015-16 when school shootings were starting to become the norm. Then last year, a good friend of mine from high school was killed in the borderline shooting. This still takes a heavy toll on me as I had sat out alone in the quad to protest gun violence and school shootings our senior year. Her mom was the activities director at my high school and her dad owned several local businesses. She and her family had a deep connection not only with our city, but also nationally as her aunt and uncle were known TV celebrities. You probably know who I'm talking about now. I remember the day she died and it will stay with me for the rest of my life. I woke up on the morning of November 7th to my roommate crying in her bed. She was from Thousand Oaks and not only frequented borderline, but her little sister went there too. She went to high school with some of the victims and lived in the same neighborhood as the shooter. I turned to Twitter to see the onslaught of tweets about the incident, desensitized and shaking my head. Until I came across the words Pepperdine student Elena Housley still missing, and I swear to God my blood turned cold and everything just froze. I called her maybe 10 times, frantically texting her and checking Snapchat to try and see if I could see any updates. I called and texted my friends back home and at my high school, and I called my mom to break down crying. When I got the confirmation from a friend at my high school that her family just had to identify her body at the scene, I locked myself in my dorm room and cried for a solid hour. I had never cried so hard in my life. She was the kindest, most loving, and just amazing person I had ever known. When I was alone with no friends, she treated me like she had known me her whole life. We had gotten especially close in our senior year as we sat next to each other in several classes and spent almost every day together during rehearsals for our school musical. I remember her love of dark chocolate and Hamilton, how she'd make musical references all the time and just brighten up anyone's day with her laugh alone. When I had to attend her funeral with my choir to sing, I saw her mother, and believe me, nothing is more painful to see than a mother who's lost her child. She came up and hugged all of us, thanking us for being there, and I had no idea what to say to her other than I'm sorry, because what can you say to someone who lost their child to such cruel, random violence? To this day, I get really bad anxiety in crowds and in closed spaces. I'm afraid that I could end up like her one day. I've already had 2 school shooting threats at my university since then, but each time I was extremely lucky enough to be off campus when it happened. I know I wasn't directly involved in any of these situations, but I want this to show how much a mass shooting can indirectly affect the people in your life. Up until I lost my friend, I was like everyone else. You read or hear about these unspeakable cruelties, but it doesn't really occur to you how traumatizing it is until it affects you personally. My heart goes out to each and every person affected by mass shootings, and I just want you to know you are not alone. I mourn Elena every day, and it's made me really appreciate the time I have with the people I care about. So please, hug your friends and family a little tighter, and don't ever take those you love for granted. You never know when you might never see them again. I was in 7th grade when one took place at my middle school. It was a snowy day, so my bus showed up late to school. The shooter was on my bus with me. Sometimes the timing of things is so incredible. Of course, when we went inside, everyone was already in class. My locker was upstairs. I distinctly remember hearing very loud noises coming from downstairs. I had never heard a gun being shot in real life, and I remember thinking, wow. Fireworks inside? At that point a teacher stuck his head out of a doorway and told me to run. Looking back at that, I wonder what he was thinking by not pulling me into that room. I ran across the balcony, too terrified to look down. He easily could have pointed up. It was just me up there. I breathlessly ran into my life sciences class and didn't know what to say. The teacher, a very stoic woman with very little care about how anyone felt around her, told me to sit down. I quietly said, I think something is going on. The students in class had no idea yet. Soon we all began to understand. That teacher, I kid you not, turned the TV on so we could watch the news. Cameras were outside our school filming, waiting for us to be evacuated, and she made us do classwork that she later graded, while we sat under our tables. I definitely received an F on that paper. It counted toward my grade. We eventually left down a back staircase into a boatload of cops who wouldn't let our parents in. Then enters the hero of this story, my father. He busted through those cops, told them he was getting his daughter no matter what they said, grabbed me up, and pulled me away from everyone. I don't remember much about the rest of that day. I think I watched a movie about soccer at home on the couch. Such a blur. I was unable to hear loud noises without jumping for weeks afterward. Kid was placed on house arrest. No idea where he is now. Syracuse Junior High shooting in '98. I was in 7th grade. I was in history class when the vice principal came over the intercom saying, "Seahawk, Seahawk, Seahawk." The teacher told us to leave everything behind and line up by the door. She peeked her head out the door, opened it and told us to follow her quietly. We all left out the side door and were led to the elementary school across the street, where they had us pack into the gym. We had no idea what was going on and thought it was an exercise. About 30 minutes later the school principal came in with a few police officers and informed us that there is currently a student whom has taken hostages in the cafeteria at our school, and that we are to stay put until it has been resolved. After about an hour we were told that everything was clear and that our parents were there to pick us up and that we needed to sign out before we leave. The following few days were weird. The school was mostly empty and we had to attend trauma seminars in the gym. We would have held them in the cafeteria, but that's where the shooter had taken hostages. After about a month everything was back to normal.